Once again, we're looking at the scan frame about this very simple framework that helps us make sense of complexity. We've got a time axis from an arbitrary now, looking how long before that now happens and also after, and the other axis going from certainty to uncertainty, predictability to unpredictability, known to unknown. And there's a really useful way of looking at that whole issue of knowns and unknowns, about known knowns, unknown knowns, and so on, that we can use scan to help us make sense of what's going on. So in one direction we have the split in scan between time to think versus no time to think. And in the other direction, from the boundary of effective certainty. As we said before, this is like the old Einstein phrase that on the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. That's true on this side when the world is certain. But as we cross over this boundary, the boundary of effective certainty, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting the same results. So we have this shift between the known and the unknown. So I'll mark that as boundary of effective certainty. It may be uncertain on this side, somewhat uncertain, but we know we can get the same results. Here we don't. So this distinction between the known and the unknown. There's unknowability about it. And in effect, down at the point of action, we have to be dealing with known knowns. We know that they're known. And we will use a machine. This is where automation comes into its forte, comes into its own. When we're dealing with known unknowns, things that we know are unknown, that's where human skill comes into the picture. A machine can't cope with the kind of uncertainties that as we get further and further across this line. When we're dealing with unknown unknowns, in the unknown unknowns, we will start to identify unknown knowns. We can make something known. And what we do is as they become more known, we bring them over. That's what experiment, as opposed to theory, hypothesis theory, converts an unknown known into something that is known. But at runtime, we can hit up against unknown unknowns. That's where they arise most often. And we will either try to force them up into the known. We're forced to go back to try to think about them. Or else, if we have to deal with them in real time, they force us into the unknown, which again, as they become, if they remain unknown unknowns, will also force us here, which is again backwards from, it forces us to spend time going back and creating time to think. Now there's a trap here that comes straight out of classic Taylorism, or so-called scientific management. It assumes that Taylorism assumes that everything is reducible to known knowns. When it hits up against an unknown unknown, it has to go up, or it can force itself over to there. But always it pushes us away from the front line, away from dealing with unknowns in real time. The only way we deal with it in real time is through skill, which is the one thing that Taylorism tries to remove. It's trying to automate everything, but automation can't deal with either any kind of unknown at all. The other thing that happens, which is a major problem, is this is why it's called the edge of panic, which you've seen from another video. There is fear that sets in. We get denial, pushing back. We get escalation, up to the manager who doesn't know how to deal with it, or the expert who doesn't know how to deal with it in real time. So Taylorism has got a lot of traps that we need to resolve because it causes slowdown or breakdown every time it hits up against an unknown. So Scan's really useful for helping us make sense of these patterns like known unknowns and so on, about how we move and how they move around within the certainty versus time space. It's a very useful tool for this kind of purpose. Thanks for watching. Do look at the YouTube description for links to further detail. And don't forget to subscribe for other videos and also to support us on Patreon to help us produce these videos and the tools themselves.